speaker's really been in the trenches of the digital media wars. She still is on the front lines, actually. She has quite a conventional education that she somehow survived due to her extraordinary intelligence and hard work. And today she serves as editor-in-chief of Anti-Media. Please help me welcome Carey Wedler.
Can you guys hear me? Yes. Cool. Is everyone having fun at Anarchapulco? Yeah? I feel like everybody had a lot of fun last night at the pool party. Yeah? Okay. I have a lot of stuff to cover, so I'm going to get right to it. First, I wanted to say I get really nervous public speaking, and I wanted to share that with you guys just so I can get it off my chest. So if I take a deep breath and you're wondering what happened to me, that's where I am. Okay, so I'm very grateful to be on this stage. I'm very honored to share the stage with so many amazing intellectuals and leaders and activists. But you might have noticed that there are not many women on this stage, and the same was true last year. There aren't many women in the community in general. So I am here to talk about why there aren't more women in the movement, as explained by a woman in the movement. Before I get into it, I have a couple disclaimers. There are going to be disclaimers throughout this thing, so just buckle up. Nothing in this speech is intended to devalue men's experiences. I am just not a man, so I'm not here to speak about men. I am a woman. That's been my experience. That's what I know about. That's what I want to talk about. But it's also not intended to collectivize all women. I'm not here to speak for all women. I'm speaking for myself. I'm speaking for my own experiences, my own observations, my own issues, and I'm sure other women have had different experiences. Finally, you are very free to disagree. I am not here to say that I have every single answer as to why there aren't more women in the movement. I'm sure that you guys have great ideas I have not even thought of, I haven't even considered. I'm just here to give you my piece. I've been in this community for 8 years now, and now I can get into it. So when I first started making videos in 2011, this is from my YouTube video creator page. These videos are now all private. Because a few years after I made them, I looked back at them and I thought, my boobs are hanging out here. And I'm leaning to my side to make them hang out even more. And I realized, I wasn't conscious of it at the time, but I realized that when I was making these videos, I had made the assumption that for anyone to care what I had to say, I had to use my sex appeal. I had to have my boobs hanging out or no one would care. So you can't see these anymore, they are private. I took them down. But you're probably wondering, like, what does this have to do with why there aren't more women in the movement? We have to go back a little bit further. So this is me at the age of 15, taking my own selfies before the term selfie existed and before we had iPhone cameras. So this was back in the days when you had to have a disposable camera and you had to beg your mom to take you to the 1-hour photo so you could get a CD-ROM and then upload it to LiveJournal so you could look sexy to all your friends in high school. So I'm 15 years old here, and I have far more sexualized pictures that I went back and looked at on my LiveJournal, but it was just too creepy and too sad to put in this presentation. It was unfortunate. So I went with something a little more tame, but you can see here that I was really trying to project my sex appeal. So I grew up on Britney Spears, I grew up on Christina Aguilera, I grew up on MTV, I grew up on fashion magazines like Cosmo Girl. I was so into makeup, I was so into fashion, and looking back on it, I realized that I got into this alternate reality because there was trouble at home. My parents were getting divorced, and I couldn't be with that. So this was a different world to go into, and it became my entire world. So by the time I was 14, I was in 8th grade. It's probably 5'5" at the time. I was still growing, weighed about 110 pounds. I decided I was fat. I had body dysmorphic disorder. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a distortion of how you view yourself. I really, really did not like myself. I was very insecure. But there's more to it than that. I'm going to raise you to the fact that I am like, oh my God, from the Valley. If you have heard the Valley girl stereotype, that is me. Born and raised in Los Angeles. I was literally born in the Hollywood Hills. My dad had a little cottage there before my parents got married. My mom had both my sister and me at home. She didn't want to be in the hospital, bless her heart, I love her. But the house was too small, so my parents had to move to the Valley. So I was raised in the Valley from the age of 4 months old. I am a Valley girl. And I was looking for images for this PowerPoint, and this is a real book. So I'm just going to read what the description says. How to teach a Val girl to talk again, even on topics other than boys, cars, eating, and clothes. So that's me. And growing up in the Valley, you're very conscious of the fact that you're from Los Angeles, but you're not from like the cool part of Los Angeles. Like if you watch Sex and the City, excuse all the likes. I mean, it's just who I am. I can't help it. If you're from, or if you've seen Entourage, if you've seen Sex and the City, anytime anybody has to go to the Valley, it's like, ugh, oh no, I don't want to go there. What a horrible place to go. So there's this feeling of like, ooh, I'm from an embarrassing place. I don't like myself. But to the credit of the Valley, as much as people rag on it, it's also a place of the Hollywood industry. So I was into fashion, I was into clothes, and when I was in college, I got a job at Urban Outfitters. If you guys know what Urban Outfitters is, it's like the most hipster place you could possibly shop. I loved it. I wanted the discount. And it was in a place called Studio City, and it's very aptly named. So there's a bunch of studios in this area of the Valley. There's Warner Brothers, there's NBC Universal, there's Disney, there's CBS Studios. So I worked as a cashier at Urban Outfitters, and celebrities would always come in. So I rang up Miley Cyrus many times, lots of different celebrities. Britney Spears came in before she shaved her head. Zac Efron would come in, and I felt so inferior as this little cashier growing up on this culture, growing up on these larger-than-life celebrities who set the culture, who set my idea of what I should be. All I could really say was, did you find everything all right? Would you like your receipt in the bag? And I just felt so inferior. And I have this picture. I just really want to demonstrate how close up to celebrity I was growing up. So this is Britney Spears. She's on Reseda Boulevard. If you've heard of Reseda, it's probably because of Tom Petty's song Free Falling. He's singing about the Valley. It's like a horrible place. But I was on Reseda when this picture was taken. I was driving in the Valley, and these paparazzi were chasing her, and this photographer literally was running on foot, and he ran into my car. So I'm like up close and personal to this celebrity world, but I'm also not in it. I'm sort of a reject. I'm an outsider because I'm not famous. I'm not part of the industry. But after college, I had no direction. I would spend my nights in college reading PerezHilton.com, which is celebrity news. I voted for Obama. He was going to fix it, and I went back to my little bubble. So after college, I had no direction, didn't know what I wanted to do. I decided, well, I was born in LA. I might as well seize the natural opportunity to go into the film industry. I thought it would be cool to be a writer. So I got a job as an intern at a very respected film studio. I don't have anything bad to say about it, honestly. They make great content, but I was in production and development. And I quickly started to realize a lot. It was very familiar. Obviously, the Me Too movement has come out, the Harvey Weinsteins of the world, the Hollywood industry. I didn't experience anything like that, but what I observed was of that ilk. So there was this executive, he was a senior vice president, and he had a reputation within the department for bringing in young actresses who he knew he wasn't going to hire. He wasn't going to cast them, but he'd bring them in. He just wanted to have them on his couch and look at them and flirt with them and be able to say that he had them in. I wasn't a part of that, but I would see them come in, and they were so hopeful and so young, and they probably left thinking like, oh yeah, this is my big break. And meanwhile, after they left, this guy would just like high-five his coworkers and laugh about it. He wasn't gonna hire them. But there was one experience that really, really made it clear to me that I did not want to stay in this industry. So I was an intern, I was an unpaid intern. I was a script reader. But the pipeline in Hollywood is like unpaid intern, assistant, and then you move on. So maybe a producer, whatever you're looking for. So I was learning to work the phones, to be an assistant. And I was on a call with this exact same executive. His assistant was out for the day. And they were having this conversation about a script they had purchased. It was a comedy, and they needed a woman for it. They were talking about potential actresses. I can't remember this woman's name. I really can't. You would know her if I did, or if I could remember it, but she was well known. And to his credit, the guy in my department said, well, what about her? And there was a slight pause. Without any humor, without any joking, the agent just said, yeah, but she's old. And I thought, oh no. So I had body dysmorphic disorder, right? And at the end of college, as part of, I think, a broader existential crisis, I developed a phobia of wrinkles on my face. So I would just like go to the bathroom at lunch at this film studio, and it's this horrible fluorescent light, and I would just look in the mirror and like smile and count my crease lines, and I was starting to think like, maybe this isn't the healthiest environment for me. I don't think I would fare well here. But it wasn't just that. So I was a script reader. So I was charged, I was the first line of defense, I guess, against all the agencies that would submit scripts. And there were so many scripts that focused on the CIA, the FBI, the police, and these were all heroes. And as I was reading these scripts, I was also starting to pay attention to what was going on around me. I was starting to find libertarianism. I was starting to find Ron Paul. I spent that whole summer watching RonPaulFlix.com. I don't know if you guys remember that website. It's not up anymore, but I'd be up until 4 a.m. just watching Ron Paul speeches. And so this environment started to become, yeah. Yeah, so this environment started to become sort of intolerable to me. And I want to credit libertarianism and Ron Paul with helping me break out of this culture because I was so steeped in it. I grew up on it, I lived in it, and when I started to find a purpose outside myself, things started to change. And I decided to leave the industry. I never made it into the industry. I was an unpaid intern. I never got hired as an assistant, but I started to break away from it, but the conditioning is still strong. This is a lifetime of consuming all of this information, all of these expectations and standards. But I still had this feeling of something's not quite right. This is not for me. And my first venture in breaking away from the matrix was actually to write a book about women. The book is unpublished. I was way too young when I wrote it. Like, I'm going to have to rewrite the whole thing. I was on the right track, but I was still really stuck in it. But now I want to share with you some of the observations I made when I first started to break away from this, because this is where I think we start to get into why there aren't more libertarian women. So, I don't think I really need to argue the point that women are valued for sex appeal. Like, this is part of human history. This is just part of human nature. If you look at the left picture, if you guys haven't seen the Fire Festival documentary on Netflix, it's fascinating. But this is a picture of a bunch of really famous Instagram models who, just by making a video of them rolling around on the beach and being sexy, they managed to create a viral campaign for the failed festival. You can watch it. It's really interesting. This is the common knowledge. I don't need to really explain this or argue this, but what I think is less discussed is the centrality of men to women's identity in our culture. So yes, sex is apparent, but it's more about romantic relationships. So I grew up on Disney princesses, and if you pay attention to these movies, essential to a happy ending is that the girl gets a boyfriend. And I noticed that this was a similar theme when I was reading scripts at this film studio. So anytime a female was the main character, the entire plot really was romance. It was revolved around her getting a man. Whereas if you looked at scripts about men, if anything, a female was a side piece. It was like, oh, I gotta save the world, and here's this hot girl on a motorcycle. You know, it's not the same. Same thing if you go to a toy aisle in toy stores. I used to walk the toy aisles, and I would look at the differences. For boys, there aren't that many girl dolls to accompany the boys. In the girls section, I don't want to say all of them, but many of them have a boy companion, whether it's Ken, whether it's the Disney princess dolls, whether it's the Bratz dolls and their boyfriends. This is really common. Before I go any further, well, first of all, I just want to say what this reflects to me is that the cultural identity is rooted in external factors for women. It doesn't come from internally. We're looking at outside approval and outside validation. But before I go any further, you might be thinking, well, this is biological, Carey. Women evolved to be dependent on men. We evolved so that we could keep a man and have him support our offspring. I agree. There's total validity to this. But two things. One, I think that we're human beings. We're not animals. We have consciousness. We can evolve past biological urges. So that's number one. Number two, when I was a little girl, I was really girly. Like, I love being a girl. I intentionally wore like a flowy skirt today because I want to display that. I love being feminine, but I also was really into guy stuff too. I remember I would spend hours playing with my toy cars. I loved the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I would play sports with my dad. But when I went out into the world, when I went out into public school, I didn't show that side. And I know that wasn't my mom's doing because she dressed my sister and I in like flannels and overalls as much as she could. She was not trying to make us girly. And so as much as femininity is part of who I am to my core, it's not all of who I am, but it's what I felt was acceptable to show to the world. So back to this consciousness thing. We can evolve past it, but it's really not easy when the cultural conditioning is as strong as it is. But there's another layer to it. So I'm talking about the centrality of men to women's lives. But we have the modern feminist paradox. So there's this mentality, I'm sure you've heard it, I'm a strong, independent woman who don't need no man. Cool, okay, that's great. But when you look at the role models who represent this mentality, most of them have achieved their independence by appealing to sex and by appealing to their ability to attract a man. So we're conditioned both to have attachment to men as part of who we are, but also to reject that this is the case, which to me is incredibly confusing. Which is it? They're kind of in contradiction. We have other examples. We have Beyonce here. She's sort of the representative of feminism in the modern world, and here she is using her body to sell sex. Then we have the lovely Kim Kardashian, who became famous through a sex tape. And I have to come back to a disclaimer, because none of this is intended to say that fashion and makeup are bad. Sex is not bad for men or women. Intimacy with the opposite sex, not bad. These are all great and valuable things. For me, what I recognize or what I see, the problem is when these things are the core of a girl's identity, which is exactly how I grew up. So we're getting these messages of dependency on men. We're also getting messages of pseudo self-empowerment. I think it's possible to be both. I think you can be empowered, you can be independent, and you can also have a healthy, intimate relationship with a man, and you can enjoy sex. But the way the culture packages these messages, there's no room for nuance. There's no room for intrinsic awareness or internal awareness. So this is a very vicious cycle. It's very unfair. And in my opinion, again, I'm not speaking for all women. I'm speaking for myself, women I know, the general culture. There's a lot there's a lack of self-love, a huge lack of self-love, and we're mired in insecurity. We lack center. And because of the centrality of men to how we're raised and how we're taught we should be, when we're not happy, I mean, who are we going to blame? If men are responsible for our happiness, what happens when we don't have a man who makes us happy? We blame them. So I believe strongly that memes are probably the best barometer of culture. They show us what resonates with people, what people identify with. So I just have some memes to present to you. I'm just going to read out loud in case you can't see. Here's one. Prayers for straight women. Ain't nothing wrong specifically. I just already know they be going through it in general because of straight men. So there's a lot of blame there, a lot of collectivization. Another one, men are trash. One alcoholic beverage later, I need a man. So again, we have this paradox, these conflicting views of like, I don't like men, but also I really want a man. Sis, if we weren't dating men that cheated on their ex, there would be no men to date. This one just upsets me, honestly. It's just total collectivization and blame and resentment, and it's really just sad. Another one, this one really gets me. This is how I apologize to my mans. I'm sorry you chose to do something that made me act crazy. I'm ready to forgive you now. P.S. I need some dick, so start acting right. So not only is it objectifying men, it's also admitting that there was some crazy reactive behavior, but also taking zero responsibility for it and blaming it on somebody else. Another one, me at 2 p.m. Fuck love, I don't need that shit. LMAO, significant other who? Me at 2 a.m. when my loneliness hits me. Sorry, it's really small text. Where is the love of my life? Where are they? So again, just speaking to this contradiction, it's very confusing. And I want to say one more thing on these toxic perceptions of love. I don't know if you guys watch a lot on Netflix, I do. There's the Ted Bundy serial killer documentary that's out right now, and there's also a show called You about a psycho stalker. And they're both really popular. I've watched both of them. And it got to the point that women on social media were like actually expressing attraction to these characters, one who's real, one who's fictional, to the point where Netflix had to tell women, please don't thirst over a serial killer. Please don't do that. And then this funny comment, she just said, Ted Bundy is not hot. May we interest you in Penn Badgley, our stalker/resident psychopath, which is you. So something's a little off here, in my opinion. If there are women in our culture who are sexually and romantically attracted to a serial killer, psychopath, something's, not right, in my opinion. It's not working. So rates of anxiety and depression are on the rise. They are on the rise for everyone. It's not just women, but girls are more at risk. Also, women take more antidepressants than men, but I have 3 stars here because I think there's a big caveat to that. And again, I don't want to speak for men, but based on my observations, I think that the reason women may take more antidepressants than men is that it's easier for women to ask for help in our culture. It's a lot more acceptable for a woman to have these vulnerable emotions and say, like, I'm not okay, whereas men, yeah, exactly, yeah. And I'm not saying antidepressants are the solution or that they help most people, but as it's viewed in our culture, that is a solution, and so women are more free to seek it. We're going to come back to some memes. I love memes. Just speaking to the anxiety and how uncentered people feel. This is a girl's meme page. It's My Therapist Says. It's one of my favorite meme pages. I identify with it. Not really a person at this point, just stress and anxiety with a body. That's really sad. 35,000 likes. That resonates with a lot of people. Me, I'm having such a good day today. My anxiety, time to sabotage. 52,000. Got another one. I want to lose weight, but not as much as I want to drink wine alone in the darkness. 124,000 likes. This is really sad. I don't think someone who, 1, doesn't like their body, and 2, wants to drown their sorrows in alcohol alone in the dark is doing okay. That's, yeah, thank you. Something's a little off here. Another one, pressing my face up against a phone screen filled with beautiful rich people for a 3rd consecutive hour. Why am I sad? This one really I feel because I didn't have Instagram back when I was taking all these selfies of myself as a high schooler, but I did sit on Saturday nights. I was a loner. I'd stay home. I'd read my magazines. And I have vivid memories of reading the magazine, looking at the models in the low-cut jeans, and then looking in the mirror and going, ugh, I don't look this way, I'm fat. Meanwhile, I wasn't fat, but I thought I was. So to summarize, anytime you see a slide where it's just a bunch of text, that's for me, not for you, because I just don't want to miss anything, so I'm just going to read this. What we end up with is a very warped and contradictory perception of our roles, potential, and power, despite being freer than ever. Many women are still miserable, just like they were when they were confined to housewife roles. So let's not get into the trad stuff. I know a lot of people like to say, well, if women just went back to being mothers and housewives, they'd be happy. They were happier then. That's not true. Women were very anxious and unhappy back then too. Not all of them, but many were. So expectations are projected onto us with very little intrinsic drive on our part. Many of us hate ourselves, hate how we look, and we believe we're fundamentally unlovable. And this is a human thing, but I'm a girl, so I'm speaking from that perspective. But at the same time, we have this independent woman mentality, but also crave acceptance and love and true empowerment, and we seek it outside ourselves. I think women are capable of so much love and care. This is the divine feminine, but we've been totally disconnected from giving it to ourselves and to others. And rather than looking inward, we resort to blame and resentment. There's men who can't live up to our expectations or make us happy, so we blame them. Then there's women who we perceive as threatening our ability to get those men who can't make us happy. We resent them and we blame them. We're chained to a manufactured contradictory image of modern womanhood with little inner agency to actually achieve and maintain the things we're told will fulfill us. There's something deeper to this, but we're going to get to that later. Okay, enter Hillary. Hillary Clinton. Here she is appealing to her femininity. Sorry. Appealing to her femininity to run for president. And now we have to talk about, we're approaching my reasoning on why there aren't more women in the movement. The political exploitation of modern femininity. So the Democratic Party and the leftist establishment has very successfully corralled women into their belief system, and they have done so by fundamentally appealing to women's sexuality and reducing them to their body parts. So you hear this, my body, my choice, hands off my birth control. There are women parading around in the streets in pussy hats, wearing vaginas on their head. Yeah, thank you. This to me is actually really sexist. Like, you're gonna reduce a woman to that in order to get her support? Thank you. And I wanna actually credit Angela Keaton of antiwar.com for, she gave me that observation many years ago, and it really settled in, and it's really stuck out to me over the years. A wonderful, strong woman. But it's not just that. So this may be the base of modern femininity in the context of the Democratic Party and the leftist establishment, but it goes deeper than that because they also have other issues, right, that they appeal to, which I call perverting the divine feminine. So this platform really capitalizes on what we generally associate with a feminine quality, which is compassion and empathy. But what they do is they distort that into statism, which is inherently exploitative, inherently violent, and it's really quite disgusting to take something so beautiful and so essential to humanity and so vital and turn it into this. Thank you. And you see this woman's sign, it says empathize and mobilize. It's just sad. I don't think she has empathy for the people she's protesting, to be honest. I've been to these marches, it's a little scary. Oh, where's my slide? There we go. So I'm gonna read again, just because I don't wanna mess this up. This narrative is so effective because it appeals to women stuck in the paradox of feeling helpless, victimized, and insecure, but wanting to feel empowered. It allows women to indulge in blaming others without having to take any real responsibility to change the world themselves. My vote is my voice, right? If I just vote, then I'm empowered. I think there was a sign I saw many of these, voting is my superpower. That's all you have to do. You just gotta go to the march, you gotta scream a little, and then you gotta, flick a little button at the voting station, and you're good, and you've done your part, and you are free, and you are empowered. There's no room for introspection, and this powerful dynamic keeps many women chained to statism. I don't know much about right-wing statism because I came from a leftist background. I don't think that it's focused as much on femininity. It's, of course, focused on collectivism. I think it's more nationalistic. It comes back to more traditional female roles. And in my opinion, it is not the dominant culture among younger women. The leftist wins out. And these qualities are unfortunately in direct conflict with libertarian values and principles. You have the collectivism, which is in direct conflict because libertarianism is about individualism. So it's hard for women to comprehend that when they're into this realm of political thought. There's also the issue that consent in this ideology only applies to your body. It only applies literally to your vagina, to your baby maker, which I find incredibly hypocritical. Like, as a woman, as an individual, as a human being, I think that I am more than just my body parts. I am my morals, I am my consciousness. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And you see this woman here in the sign, it says, I do not consent. Okay, she doesn't consent to Donald Trump, who knows what else she doesn't consent to, but I would be willing to bet she is chomping at the bit to impose her will on someone else who doesn't consent. So there's a fundamental misunderstanding of consent here. Thank you. And this ideology, finally, is inextricably linked to blame and victimization. And this is true for both men and women. It's true for both the left and right. It's just, in my opinion, something that's inherent to statism. There's very little room for self-responsibility, which again is sort of a centerpiece of libertarianism and true freedom. You have to be responsible for yourself, but that's not really promoted here. Some examples of this blame game: the wage gap, men, white men, Republicans, Donald Trump. And you have it on the right as well: immigrants, Muslims, Democrats, whatever. But again, I'm talking about leftist women because this is the dominant culture. But I didn't come here just to talk about leftists. You guys are well aware of like what's wrong with that ideology. I think you're aware of how a lot of it works. I hope I'm adding some extra perspective based on my experiences. But speaking of self-responsibility, speaking of introspection, we gotta talk about some more difficult stuff within our community. So it took me about 2 minutes to find these comments. One is from probably the most popular Instagram ANCAP page. The other is from just another ANCAP page. So not only women are weak, they're also stupid. I'm not gonna comment on the grammar here. I'm just gonna leave it for what it is. Another one, men need to stop expecting women to be logicians with how they perceive the world. Sorry, what? Yeah, okay, sorry, what? I get what you mean. Women use both hemispheres of the brain, so they don't separate logic from emotion very well. We can't honestly expect them to be as reasonable as men in general. Okay, so if I'm a girl and I kind of sense that something is wrong with the system, I'm looking for a different set of values. I'm looking for another way. I stumble upon a libertarian meme page. I'm like, yeah, that sounds good. I agree with that. And then I see this in the comment section. I don't think I'm going to feel very invited into this community. I don't think I'm going to feel welcome. I don't, thank you. I appreciate that. One more. So this one is actually from what I hope is a former thought leader in this community. I'm not going to say the name, doesn't need to be said. Repeal the 19th Amendment for the sake of Western civilization. Okay, so logically, because libertarians love logic, if you are insulting the one thing that a statist woman thinks gives her empowerment, I mean, there are other things, but a very powerful expression of their independence, of their freedom, their right to vote, however misguided it may be. If you are openly saying not only that she shouldn't have that right, but because she has that right, society is failing, can you logically expect her to be interested in what else you have to say? I don't think you can. And because the theme of this conference is Life Unchained, I just want to point out that this kind of mentality exhibits a high degree of blame and victimization among people who believe this. It's women's fault we aren't free, and it's women's fault the government sucks. If only we didn't have women voting, then we would be free and it wouldn't be so bad because statist men are so much better and make such better decisions for us. Kind of change your resentment there. Another disclaimer, this is obviously not all men in our community. This is not even close to a majority. This is a small minority, but I've been in this community for a long time now, and I've consistently seen this sentiment. It's around. It doesn't mean that it's a pervasive view, but it's something that is not going away, and it's something that persists. Just need to say that. But to the whole bunch. So aside from these misogynists, who are few and far between, but still loud and vocal and consistent, there's a more pervasive communication problem. Libertarians love logic. We love logic, right? We love reason. We cannot have a free society without it. It's never going to happen. We need to be reasonable. We need a contrast to the hysteria that engulfs statism. But men, more than anyone, especially these lovely commenters that I have included in my PowerPoint, since they love to complain about how women are so irrational and don't understand logic, if they are so logical, maybe they should recognize that women are a little bit more in touch with our emotions. Side note, there are also a lot of statist men who are unbelievably emotional. Like, you can read the comment sections. It's not just women who are emotional. Yeah, thank you. But this doesn't mean that women are incapable of logic, just like it doesn't mean that men are incapable of emotional intelligence and compassion and love. We're capable of all these things. But I just think that maybe a softer approach would be more effective. Which brings us to compassionate libertarianism. So, just real quick, crazy idea, I am going to blow your mind. A lot of people, a lot of women, don't respond well to being attacked and insulted. And I am speaking from experience, thank you. If you've seen any of my videos, especially earlier on, I'm really condescending and I'm really mean and I'm really reactive. So I'm speaking for myself as well. I'm not trying to preach to you guys. This is something I've had to learn and I'm still learning. Sometimes I still snap and I have a video where I'm just like, raging and it's mean, and I'm trying my best. I'm really trying. Statism is frustrating. But what I'm really getting at here is, in contrast to the leftist monopolization of pseudo-compassion, libertarianism actually has the high ground on morality and genuinely caring for others. And we can use practical examples to appeal to women's compassion and their logic. Crazy idea. So for example, the effectiveness of markets at lifting people out of poverty. There's so much evidence of this. You worry about the poor. Well, look at what this system we advocate does for the poor versus socialism. We have the power of voluntary cooperation. If you look at Planned Parenthood after Donald Trump won the election, so many people donated money, voluntarily because it was a service they valued and they were willing to fund it. This is very much a fundamental part of what we believe and what we're trying to bring to the world. Great example of this, Liberty memes. I'm sure many of you have heard of them, shared their memes, seen their memes, even if you don't know the name. They have established a program where members of the community, they have a Facebook group of at least 10,000 people, maybe 15. They donate money to help people in the community. So if someone needs a medical procedure, people step up and they give money. If someone's about to get evicted, people step up, they give money. And I've talked to the brothers who do this. They're David and Peter Gay. They're awesome. They've been doing this a long time. And their express purpose here, I've spoken to David, is to demonstrate that we can have a free society. We can be compassionate. We will help each other. People care, and they're willing to help others in need. Yeah, thank you. Don't need to be forced. And then there's also the value of self-ownership beyond just having a pussy. I think this is a really good angle we could take with women. Thank you. Because women don't want to be objectified. They don't want to be cast out because of their sex. But the very ideology that they're subscribing to right now is doing exactly that. It is reducing them to that. And I think libertarianism has such a broader, more respectful view of human beings, including women. So I'm just going to say, these are just a few ideas, but I think it might be more effective than like talking to a girl online on a libertarian post and spamming her with 15 articles from Mises.org that are 5,000 page or 5,000 word each essays and telling her like, oh, you don't get economics and you're irrational, read this and you'll get it. People used to do that to me and I was like, I'm good, I'm not gonna do that. I've read Mises now, but at the time, who cares? I'm not gonna do that. What it took were practical examples to really make me feel at ease and to appeal to my sense of compassion. Because morally I understood, yes, the state is violent. No, I don't want to subscribe to this, but there was this, but what about poor people? You know, how do we help them? At the end of the day, the morals trump the practicality for me, but the practicality is there, and I just needed to learn about it. And I just want to note, again, living chained, living unchained. If you are one of these people, I'm not saying you are, I'm just saying you in general. I'm not accusing anybody in this audience, but if you refuse to adopt better selling strategies, if you would rather just sit around and blame women and say they're just incapable of understanding this wonderful belief system, when there are better options to communicate, you're living chained to blame and resentment. You're resentful towards people, you're resentful towards the state, and you're also giving the state more power because you're assuming that you can't change people's minds. Thank you. They're just incapable of comprehending this wonderful, different way to live and way to structure the world. And if you're living like that, again, I don't think you're free. You're living in blame, you're living in resentment, you're angry. You're not free. But now we have to get into something that I'm nervous to talk about, honestly, but I feel that it needs to be said. We got two things to tackle here, and I'm gonna let the memes talk a little bit. So the first one says, every girl got a dude in her inbox talking to himself. And this is really true. I'm sure a lot of ladies can identify with this. And oftentimes, when you're on the internet, whether you're a public person like me or whether you just participate in libertarian groups or you're in this community, you're probably gonna end up with a guy who keeps messaging you and keeps messaging you, keeps messaging you, doesn't quite get it, keeps trying to talk to you, and you don't really know how to navigate it because you don't want to be mean, right? You want to be polite, you want to be nice, you want to be kind, but at the same time, it's kind of making you really uncomfortable. So there's this. But this is what I'm really nervous about, okay? So there's also a little bit bigger problem. This meme of Mickey, it's just a joke. I don't screenshot conversations. I have no desire to do that, but it says, why did you screenshot? It's a surprise tool that will help us later. So it's not just random people on the internet. It's not just members of the community. There are thought leaders. There are very respected and credible people in this community, well-known, who do not live up to their principles and their standards. And if I wanted to screenshot some of the conversations I have with them, I don't think they'd be very happy, and I don't think that they would be living up to their reputations. I'm going to give one example. There was one guy who I considered a friend who does a lot of really good work. I would never dispute that, but at one point earlier this year, he decided that in exchange for him having helped me with some of my video titles over the years, I should send him naked pictures of me. And he asked about 5 times, and he kept pushing, and he kept pushing, and I was very clearly uncomfortable. And I didn't do it. Like, I at least have that boundary. I didn't feel that obligated, but it didn't feel safe. We're talking about divine feminine. We're talking about divine masculine. Well, I'm not really talking about divine masculine, but I am now. What I love about men, I love men, don't get me wrong, I love men so much. I love masculinity. I love feeling safe. I love feeling protected. And when this is going on, it's really hard to feel safe. It is really hard to feel like you're in a place where you're respected, where you don't have to worry, where you can be vulnerable. And when this is going on, you can't do that. But I'm not going to name names. I thought about it, but I don't want to, and I want to explain why, because this is getting to the heart of what I really came here to talk about. The internet strangers who can't take a hit, they're hurting, they're lonely. I'm not mad at them. I may have learned to just not respond, you know, just let it go. But they're not doing okay. They're looking for connection. The movement leaders who can't live by their own standards are definitely hurting. And I think this is evidenced by the fact that they are giving me hard evidence of some really shady things, and they don't even stop to think about it. They're not like, maybe I shouldn't have a text record of me being really shady and creepy here. No, because they're hurting. They're looking for validation. They're looking for connection. And I strongly believe that publicly shaming people is not going to make them change. It just makes them, thank you. I don't think that making people feel bad about issues they're struggling with does anything to help them. I think it only drives them deeper into those issues. But there's a caveat here, which is that I have been very fortunate to have not been physically harassed or assaulted in this movement, or in my life, really. A really creepy British dude grabbed my butt in London when I was like 19, and that's the most I've ever had to go through. And I'm so grateful for that, because a lot of women have experienced worse, and they've experienced worse in this community. I've heard stories of assault. I've heard stories of harassment, and it is not my place to share those stories, but it exists, to the point where the women in this community, we have our little network, just like in Hollywood. We tell each other if there is a creep. We tell each other who to stay away from, because it is what we have to do to take care of ourselves. So me not naming names when it comes to being verbally harassing and creepy, that's one thing. It's also not my place to name other people who have been victims of real assault. That's for them, but that's different. When I'm talking about publicly shaming people, when we're talking about actual violations of other people's rights, that's different. But my whole point here, and what I'm really getting at, is anarchists and libertarians really love to look down their noses at status. Like, ugh, they're such sheep. They haven't figured it out. We're so free. We get it. To the point where when I start to talk about emotional healing and suffering at conferences like this, I often have the conversation with people of, yeah, I mean, I'm so depressed because of the way the world is. And there's truth to that. But I also think that there's truth to the fact that we're all suffering. We are human beings, and simply being mentally free is not the only piece of the puzzle to true liberation. I'm going to use myself as an example here. If you know me at all, you know me from this video. I got to speed it up. I forgot to check the clock. Okay, you know me from this video. I made this video. There's a very strong anarchist message at the end of it. I was an anarchist. I was a full-on anarchist. But at this point in my life, I was miserable. It was the most emotionally chaotic time in my life. I have never been so unhappy. I've never been going through so much struggle. But outwardly, I look like this really spunky, cool anarchist school girl, and I was. But I also was not fully healed. Anarchism did not do it for me. So I'm going to read it real quick. I think this is my last long slide. Shared suffering. Whether it's liberal women or any other kind of status clinging to statism to feel empowered, creepy anarchist men crossing lines to feel validated, or libertarians lashing out at status, the fundamental emotional reactivity and blame are the same. We may be mentally free, but based on my experiences in the community and with healing myself, emotionally we are just as disturbed as the status. Male or female, status, anarchist, man, woman, we all have emotional trauma and conditioning. There's much about statism to be angry about, don't get me wrong, that is a valid emotion. But often our past traumas and personal experiences often exacerbate the suffocating feelings of anger, blame, resentment, anything reactive. So I want to use my body dysmorphia as an example. The culture did not make me hate my body. There was already something hurting in me. There was a deep feeling of being unlovable that came from childhood trauma that had nothing to do with the culture, but the culture made it worse. Same thing with statism. So if you already feel disempowered, the statism swoops in and it gives you this pseudo sense of empowerment, but it didn't create the original suffering. So anarchism did not fix all my problems. Only dedicated self-worth has done self-work and self-worth, to be honest, both. Through the work, I've gotten the worth. Living attached to these patterns, behaviors, and perspectives is a result and perpetuator of emotional suffering, and it feeds into unconscious emotions, and we then become emotionally beholden to them. So I want to take a moment and quote Sterling Lujan. He's speaking tomorrow. He's a wonderful treasure in our community. I've been editing his book, which will be out as soon as I finish this conference. I'm going to have a lot more time to finish it up quickly, but I just want to come back to what he talks about. So, argumentation alone is not enough. We must compel people to empathize with our plight, to stand in our shoes so they may awaken to their servitude and feel and experience truth. We must grasp our own feelings and let those around us know them intimately and deeply. As social creatures, this is how we touch the hearts and minds of those who cannot see their fetters and feel the cuts from the lash. Thus, I beckon us all to feel so strongly and emphatically that it brings people to tears. I believe universal freedom depends on it. I love him. Yeah, he's great. So all I'm trying to say here is use your logic to arrive at compassion. If, in fact, women are so irrational and so incapable of logic, then be logical and shift your strategy. Appeal to their softer and more emotional instincts. To do this, though, you have to start with yourself. You have to bring compassion to yourself. I learned in a very difficult way, around the time I made that blowtorch video and in the time after, that I was really hurting someone at the time, someone I cared about, but I was unable to see how I was hurting them because I didn't have compassion for them. I couldn't see their struggle. I didn't want to change it because I had none for myself. In order to do this, we have to get to compassion not only to dispel the stereotype of cold-hearted libertarians who hate the poor, but also to be emotionally free. So we talk about compassion a lot in our culture. It's kind of a buzzword now. I want to bring a really powerful definition, in my opinion, that's really helped me. And it's from a book called The Mindful Self-Compassion Workbook by Kristen Neff and Christopher Germer. If you're interested in this kind of work, I cannot recommend it enough. It has helped me so much. There are 3 elements of self-compassion. Mindfulness, being aware of what you're feeling, being present to it. I feel anxious. I feel sad. This happened, and this is how I'm feeling right now. Then there's the element of common humanity, which really connects us to our fellow human beings. So if you're heartbroken, it's this, oh man, this is what being heartbroken feels like. Other people feel this. This is not abnormal. This is totally valid. And then there's this act of self-kindness. So it's a popular saying is you would never talk to your friends the way you talk to yourself. And chances are you're hard on yourself. So this is just a practice of switching the perspective from, so for example, I got deleted, anti-media was removed, we were censored, and I was really going through a hard time. And there was this voice in me that was saying like, oh, get over it. Why are you being so weak? You gotta get back up and be louder now. But then I had to switch the narrative to, oh my gosh, this does really suck. This hurts. It's like, it's okay that you feel this way. So this is mindful self-compassion. Okay, I got one more summarization, and then we're really rounding it out. Whether male or female, we all struggle with emotional suffering totally unrelated to the state and culture. We have to get to the heart of that, and in the spirit of true self-ownership and personal responsibility, heal ourselves to make our movement more inviting, not just for women, but all humans, because freedom applies to everyone. It's difficult emotions that drive young girls to seek identity in culture and statism. It's difficult emotions that lead libertarians to reactive emotions that scare women away. It's difficult emotions that lead guys to be creeps, both in and outside the movement. If you are a statist, you aren't free. If you're an anarchist who lashes out at others, you aren't free. If you're an anarchist who enjoys creeping on women and aren't aware or don't care that it makes them feel unsafe and pressured, you are definitely not free. If you aren't in touch with your emotions and able to feel them and process them with consciousness and kindness, you aren't free. You're chained, and while philosophical anarchism is vital, so is emotional freedom. Thank you. Thank you. And in case you're wondering, well, why should we change? They're the ones who suck. Look at these women who just can't grasp it and they want to impose their will on us through statism. This is why. We have, well, it's kind of hard to see, so I'll just tell you. Kylie Jenner and Ariana Grande, 2 of the biggest pop stars, they are followed by millennials, followed by members of Generation Z. They appeal to women. Between them, they have almost 300 million followers. This is the culture. If we ever want to see freedom, true freedom on a large scale, we have to fight the culture war. And I want to give a shout out to the many meme lords and meme masters in our community because they are amazing. They reach millions of people just with memes. We have the ammo. We have the ammo to fight this culture war. We're just not on this level. But if we ignore that it exists, we are absolutely not going to spread freedom to as many people as we need to. Part 2. Why should we change? They're the ones who suck. Do you want women in the movement or not? Because the fact that this question exists and is so common says to me that, yeah, we want more women in the movement. I think this is a true desire. But the reality of the situation is I don't want to live in a hyper-masculine free society. This is why I want more women. I love men, like I said. Thank you. Yeah. But I also don't want to live in a hyper-feminine one. Oh my gosh, I have 30 seconds. Okay. And I also don't want to live in one, I love women too. I have so many amazing girlfriends. But again, I need a balance. And I also don't want to live in a society that is hyper-reactive and hyper-emotional and unconscious. So the core of everything I'm trying to talk about, shared humanity. We need balance in the movement, we need masculine logic, and we need feminine empathy. But we also need to understand that we are all capable of both. And I want to just give a quick shout out to my parents, because without my dad's compassion and empathy, from the day I was born, I would probably have way more daddy issues. Like, he has given me such an amazing sense of gentleness and kindness, whereas my mom gave me an amazing love of learning and absorbing information and having a brain and thinking. And they both provided. My mom also gave me compassion. My dad also gave me logic. We're all capable of both. And what it comes down to is that we all share the human need to feel secure and loved and to give it to ourselves. And we also share the desire to be free. And I'm going to end with that because I'm out of time. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And also, they're adding time to my clock. Thank you for that. I didn't see it happen. But since I have 40 seconds, oh no, it's going up now. Oh, never mind. Okay, but I'm teaching a yoga workshop today at 3:30. We're gonna do a lot of deep stretching, getting into the connective tissue. We're gonna do breathing exercises. It's on the website, it's $20, it's really cheap. Bring 2 towels, 2 blankets, 2 pillows, whatever you have. We don't have props, so we're just gonna make do with what we have. Thank you so much for listening. You're wonderful. Thank you for having me, tolerating my nervousness, and my, Valley Girl, everything. Thank you.